Okay, so let's move on. Why did I jump all the way back here? What are we doing? Okay, we talked about while loops. We're going to talk about for loops now. Okay, and I told you that there were two types of loops, and the while loop was basically the more general loop, and for loop is a less general loop that's kind of targeted towards these types of we use them a lot with lists to access the values in a list. So let's come in here and kill these. Start over again. Right, we're going to set up a list. Animals will be a list. We'll have the variable animals. It's going to point to, a list out in memory. We're going to create a new list, capitalized animals. We decided that animals deserve dignity, so what we're going to go through is we're going to capitalize their names to give them some dignity. We're going to come through. What the for loop is going to do is it's going to take this loop variable animal, and it's going to take this list animals, and it's going to take, in successive passes through, it's going to take the first element in animals and assign it to animal, and then perform the body of the loop. Next time through, it'll take the second element, go through, perform the body of the loop. Third element, perform the body of the loop. Fourth element, body of the loop. Fifth element, body of the loop. So animals will go through and successively take on the values cat, monkey, hawk, tiger, and parrot. And then we'll just capitalize it and put it in our new list and then print out our list. So we come through, first time through, animal gets the string cat, the first element in the list. We capitalize it and we append it onto our empty list cap animals. So now cap animals is no longer empty, it has a capital cat. Next time through, animal becomes the next element, which is monkey. Cat, monkey. Cat, capital monkey. Hawk. Tiger. Parrot. Are parrot heads still a thing, or you guys kind of forgot about Jimmy Buffett? Then at the end we print out cap animals, and we get our capital animals. We have two lists here: animals uncapitalized and animals capitalized. Okay, so that's in the simplest sense what a for loop does. The syntax. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question about so say for example you were to do could you do in the for loop for instead of animal, like say I less than, I don't know, like, so you can run, like the for loop will go through the list but not like the entire thing, or could you be more like specific about how far you want it to go through the list, or just a specific
So you can be specific about. Okay, so we'll get into this a little bit, and we'll talk about ranges and other ways to use a for loop. But the thing to keep in mind is that a for loop walks through every element of a list. Now we have break and continue statements that we can use to execute or to exit a list prematurely. We'll get into those in a couple of lectures. But right now what we're doing is we're generating a list, right? And then we're walking through every element of that list, right? So, in this form of the for loop, you're going to generate a list, you're going to walk through all of it. If you wanted to, we could exit early using breaks and continues, but we'll talk about that in another lesson. Just kind of keep in mind that you're going to walk through the entirety of the list for right now, unless you do something special, right? If you put a break in there or continue in there, you don't necessarily have to, but until we get to those, you're going to walk through every element of the loop. And what we're going to talk about is ways to generate elements so that you only access the parts of the list that you want. We'll get into that when we talk about range in just a few seconds, hopefully. Either a few seconds or 3 days.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so animal is a loop variable. Okay, so let's talk about the syntax a little bit. While had a while, for has a for. This is a loop variable. That's the value, or that's the variable within the loop that's going to successively get cat, monkey, hawk, tiger, parrot. In is just a keyword. And then animals is the list that you're iterating over. And then at the end, we have this just like all of our other statements, our while statements and our if statements, we have a colon at the end to signify the end of the control portion of the loop. We indent. Anything within this indent is part of the loop. We want to break the loop. This can be one or more lines. It can be nested for loops. It can be whiles. It can be ifs inside this indented block. When we're done with it, then we bring ourselves back out to the same level as the for, and our loop is over. Okay, so that's pretty much what this says, and the whole process of walking animal down through the successive values that are stored in animals, the list, is called iterating, and we iterate over the elements of the list. Okay. So now here's where we get a little bit funky. We talked about aliasing. We talked about being able to change values in a list. Let's look at some ways of using for that just end up not working. So let's come in here. We're going to start off with our simple. I sometimes find that Python Tutor gives us a better feel for what's going on if we follow through. At the same time, it kind of sometimes feels like makes it seem too simple, and then it's kind of difficult to get why we think it's hard. I don't know, whatever. We're going to have this capitalized, and we're going to try to do the same thing. We're going to capitalize the values in a list, and we're going to do it using a for loop, but we're going to do it using a for loop within a function. So we define our function, we define our animals, right? Everything looks pretty much the same as it was before. And now we're going to call our capitalized list animals, right? It's going to do the same thing. It takes this names. Names is an alias for animals. They both point to the same list. Cat, monkey, hawk, tiger, parrot. We create our empty capitalized list. And now we're going to walk through, and we're going to go through every animal in names, right? Names is our animals. And we're going to capitalize it, and we're going to add it into our cap names. So cap names should start growing, right? Cat, capital monkey, capital hawk, capital tiger, capital parrot that nobody cares about because you've never been to Margaritaville. Oh well. And now we're done with our loop. We've iterated over all of the animals in this list. We'll bounce out, we'll go to our next line, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this variable names, and we're going to say, okay, we want to change names. Instead of having a separate cap names, we want to have this names, and we are going to say names equals cap names. And then we're going to exit our function. Well, names and animals are aliased, but when we do this names equals cap names, what we're actually doing is we're changing where names points. So now the local variable to the capitalized list points to cap names, but that doesn't impact where animals points to. Okay, does that kind of make some sense-ish? So now when we exit, what we actually do is we get rid of all this stuff down here that's just associated with our function call, and it turns out that all that work we did absolutely nothing to our original list, and we lose the capitalization. Okay, so this is a place where the aliasing doesn't help us. Because when we do this step, we're breaking the aliasing. We're making names point somewhere other than, yes, we have the first three of these, I think, are what not to do. So when we do that, we break the aliasing, and we're no longer modifying what we think we're modifying. Okay, so let's try again. That's one way to write it wrong. We're just going to change capitalized list. So we'll just come in here. We'll do that. Okay, now we're going to try something else, right? We tried walking through and making an auxiliary list. And that didn't work. So now what we're going to try to do is we're going to try as we go along to capitalize each of the values. Right, so we'll start off the same, right? We call our capitalized list. Names and animals both point to the same thing. We're going to enter our for loop. We know that n is going to get every animal in our list. And n.capitalize is going to capitalize that animal. Strings are immutable, though. So when we do this, we don't change this value. We return a new value with a capital cat. So instead of changing this, we create a local variable, capital cat, and we immediately go back up to the top of the loop and assign the next value in our list to n and completely lose the capital cat. Right, so we never modified this. This is another not way to do it. Right, we capitalize monkey, we throw monkey away. We capitalize hawk, we throw hawk away. Tiger, throw tiger away. Parrot, well, doesn't change this. Parrot's still an n, but when we return from our routine, we throw that away as well. Didn't work. So let's think back to our while loop. I think back to the while loop next. Yeah, let's think back to our while loop. So we did a while loop. We weren't accessing the elements of our we weren't generating the elements of our we weren't accessing the elements of our list. What we were doing was we were generating an index. And if we do that, what we find out is that, well, we're generating I equals 0. And now we're going to march through until we reach the end of our list. And this kind of gets back to the question, can we figure out how to skip things or control what variables we actually access from the list? Well, we can if we start doing something like this. Right, now we're going to do the same thing we did with the for loop without the index. But we're going to walk through and we're going to generate an index. So first we generate an index 0. Then we take this names sub 0, right? This is an element of our list, but it's an explicit element of our list. And we know that we can assign to explicit elements of our list. And we'll assign it the new capitalized value, right? So we'll look at what's already there. We'll capitalize it, and we'll assign it back. And that capitalizes cat. And then we increment that to 1 or by 1 to 1, right? And now we know that we're accessing list element sub 1, which is monkey. And we overwrite list element sub 1 with monkey. And we can do this because lists are mutable, right? Strings and tuples are immutable. We can't do it with them, but we can do this with lists. And we can walk through all of the values. So now the question becomes, if this works for a while loop, and I saw a question fly by, what's the difference between a for and a while? This is what we're going to start talking about. If we can do this with a while loop, how do we do this with a for loop? Or can we do this with a for loop? Right? So when we come back from here, we've actually changed our animals list by assigning to each individual element one after another. All right, so we can do this with a while. So what we want is we want a way to generate indices for loops. And remember that for loops need a list. So if we come in here and we say something like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's rewrite this in terms of a for loop. Let's say, or let's do the indices equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's write this in terms of a for loop. We can say for I in indices okay, so now I is going to take on the value 0. When it takes on the value 0, okay, we're going to come in here. We're going to have indices is a list of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. As we walk through this for loop, I is going to be 0 first. When it's 0, we modify cat sub, list sub 0, animals sub 0, from lowercase cat to capital cat. Whoops. Yeah, this is a bad line. We don't need to do that. And if we do that, in fact, we will not work. So let's start over again. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. There, 0. Right? Capital cat. I becomes 1 because we're in, right? It gets the next value in this list. Monkey. It gets the next value in this list, right? We were doing this manually with the while loop. Here we're just setting up a list that has all the values we want to access. Right? So now hawk, tiger, and parrot. And now when we get out, right, we've just like with the while loop, we've changed all of our values and we can print it out. And the question was, can we control this? You know, I don't think very highly of tigers. I think they're imposter lions. So we're just going to skip capitalizing tigers. I like tigers. They're kind of cool. But we're going to pretend we don't like tigers. We don't like Tony. I don't like Tony the tigers. Okay? And now if we do this, what we'll find is that I gets the values 0. We do cat. 1. We do monkey. 2. We do hawk. We're going to skip 3. We're not going to do tiger. And we're going to do parrot. So we can control the values we access by controlling. He does make good cereal. But I don't like his commercials. Anyway, I'm not going to diss on Tony anymore. And now we've gone through all of the values. We've capitalized everything. We're going to exit and we can print out animals, but we haven't changed tiger. Okay, so we want a way to generate, it's kind of nasty to go in and type that in for any possible list. So what we want to do is we want to start talking about ways to generate this list automatically. And to do that, we're going to start looking at something called a range operator. Okay, so the range operator generates values in a sequence. This is kind of an important line, almost, but not quite like a list. So what does that mean? Well, it means that in 2.6, it was a list. Now it no longer is. So if we say something like range 5, or let's see, we had 5 elements in our animals. Let me grab the animals. Right, we had this for our animals. Do a Control C, do a Control V over here. Right, length of animals is 5. Right, if we do a range 5, range length of animals, we get this funky looking thing. It just says it's given us a range thing for 0 to 5, and we can ask it, well, that's not all that useful. What type is that? And it'll tell us that it is a type range. Not useful. The call is useful, but for us to look at it is not necessarily all that useful because it's not giving us more information. However, we can do something like list. And if we do that, then we will generate the elements that this range call would actually generate. So in 2.6, you didn't need this list. In 3.6, you need this list. So we will generally talk about this as a list. It's not a list. It's called a generator function. It generates values. These are the values it generates. You don't need the list when you're using it in a for loop. So we can do something like for I in range 5 or range length animals, print I, right? And that'll work, right? We don't need the list. If we have the list, it will also work. If you type it correctly. What do I got? 3 minutes. Told you this was a long one. Right, that also works. But range is called a generator function. If you want to see the values that it generates, you have to throw it into a list so that you can actually get the values. All right, but that's how it's almost but not quite a list. We did this, right? Whatever value you put here, it'll generate the values from 0 up to n minus 1. Essentially, it generates the indices to access every element in a list of length 5, if you do range 5. It can be more complicated. You can control the beginning and the end. So, for example, beginning, the end, and the increment. So if instead of let's say we don't want cat and we don't want parrot, we can do indices equals list range 1, right? That'll skip the cat. Cat's 0. We want to go till, we want to skip the parrot, so we want to go to 4 instead of 5. And maybe we want to skip every other one. So we want to skip hawk 2. And then we can print out indices just to see it. Right? When we do that, what we've generated now is a list that just has 2 values, 1 and 3. So we can do fine control over the elements we want to access by changing the parameters we put in our range. Okay, so now we're going to do 1 and 3. So we'll capitalize monkey at 1, and we'll capitalize Tony, the tiger. And that'll be all we capitalize. Okay? So this range is pretty powerful. We don't actually have to put it there. We don't have to put it into a list and then access it. We can also just pop it down here and use it directly in the 4. But the thing you want to remember is that what you're doing is you're generating a set of indices for values that you actually want to hit within your function, right? So we can walk down through this again, and this should work the same way, capitalizing monkey and tiger. Okay, and then nothing else. All right. Let's see where we are. Sure. It's not horrible. We did pretty good. Let's come in here and we'll just change this one more time to get all the animals, right? If you want to get all the animals, you just use the length of the list. In this case, the length of the list is the length of names. And we can run it again. Right now, we should capitalize everybody. First time through, I should be 0. We'll capitalize cat. 1, we'll capitalize monkey. 2, we'll capitalize hawk. 3, we'll capitalize tiger. And 4, we will capitalize parrot. Okay? All right, let's see where we are. We are here. So the nice thing about this is if you do this, whatever list you generate, that's all the values you'll do. So you don't have to worry about this idea of, I lost my place. There we go. You don't have to worry about infinite loops, right? You don't have to manage your index counter explicitly. By generating this list, that manages the index counter for you. And this is a pretty common use in for loops to actually generate this. What do we have for exercises? Where are we? Awesome. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to let you guys go. We have covered all of the material that you need to do the lecture exercises, which I'm very proud of. We will pick this up with slicing on Thursday. All right, so enjoy yourselves. We'll continue diligently working on your test. You guys are dismissed. I'll hang out for a little bit and answer questions. I'm not going to answer questions on grading of the test. We're still going through that. All right.
Thank you, Professor.